Welcome, everyone, to the Spring Town Hall for ACCESS. My name is Christine Williams, and I'm the Executive Director of ACCESS. I'm speaking to you from downtown Toronto, where it does not feel remotely springy. It's very cold and wet. So I hope wherever you're joining us from that you have a little bit more sunshine, and we are very glad that you're here. Next slide. So I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement and reiterate on behalf of the ACCESS leadership our respect for this land, and that we recognize and acknowledge the relationship the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people across Canada have with the land that all Canadians live on and cherish. I'd also like to state or restate a commitment from ACCESS that as we work to create and implement and continue this pan-Canadian network, that we would like to and we will consider each of the 634 different First Nations communities, 53 Inuit communities, and 8 Métis settlements who have a unique historical, cultural, spiritual, and environmentally sustainable connection to the land that their people and ancestors have inhabited since time immemorial. And so that you know, ACCESS is firmly committed to working to build relationships that include First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. So our agenda for today, a warm welcome, and I am going to cover a little bit around what's new at ACCESS to give you an idea of what's been happening since we last gathered, which would have been January of this year. Stephanie will talk in a little bit more detail about the project portfolio, and then I'm thrilled to say that we have two spotlight talks and two guests that are helping to present this town hall. So Ty and Stephanie will both give talks about two projects that they are leading for ACCESS. We'll then turn it over to Adrienne Kodire, who's one of the co-chairs of ACCESS, and she'll talk about sustainability and funding for the network. And then we'll end with a little bit of what's next and ask you to mark your calendars for some exciting events happening. As always, at these town halls, we make sure to keep a section at the end for an open Q&A. And we do that because this is a webinar. We do that through the Slido app or Slido website. So you can send your questions in, type them in, either scan that QR code or just go to slido.com. And the code for this particular meeting is ACCESS May Town Hall. So that Q&A session will include questions you may have for Ty and Stephanie. So we'll, with your indulgence, save them till the end so that we can cover all the questions at the end. Ty may or may not be able to stay. So if he's unable to stay, we will make sure those questions get to him and get answered. So welcome. Some of you have been involved in ACCESS since the very beginning of this network and even before it existed in the creation of it. And others of you may be new to ACCESS, and we welcome all of you for being here. So just to make sure you understand what it's all about, ACCESS is a national research network, and we are committed to empowering Canadian the childhood cancer community in Canada to transform health and experiences for children and their families. And this is really a unique collective. It is all kinds of different communities coming together to form a single community. So we have scientists, we have healthcare providers, we have industry leaders, we have partner organizations, advocates for childhood cancer, and of course, patients and their families. And there may be other categories of people that are joining, and we welcome everyone and are trying to build as big a tent as possible to represent the pediatric cancer community in Canada. Okay, what's new at ACCESS? So in a snapshot, we like to show this just to give you a sense of timelines. And this represents numerous activities and different types of communications and engagements. It's not everything that we've been doing, but it gives you a little bit of sense of some of the work that's been ongoing in the last 4 or 5 months. And we'll go into a little bit more detail about some of them. But of course, our second annual meeting was held in January. Immediately following that, we had our first external advisory board meeting, first in-person external advisory board meeting. And this was a very helpful group of international and Canadian leaders in pediatric cancer and in cancer research in general, who are helping to advise us on some of our scientific portfolio, but also in our organization and some of our policy issues. So we focused quite a bit in that meeting on clinical trials. Following the meeting, we had a national call to action to support pediatric cancer and ACCESS in particular. And then we had, you may have seen in April that our second newsletter came out, the ACCESS newsletter, which is a more in-depth look at some of the impacts of our work. We have now published the annual meeting report, which I'll talk about in a moment. And then you see numerous other events along that timeline and engagements. We had our Fellows Conference just last week. We had a webinar yesterday, one of our knowledge translation webinars, and we have numerous other webinars coming up over into the fall. Lots of activities for the ACCESS leadership as well. We've been at various meetings internationally and in Canada below, and trying to really increase the profile and representation of ACCESS in important conversations that are relevant to pediatric cancer. So underlying there, you see some of the work of the Secretariat. The ACCESS Summer Experience is back for summer students. Stephanie will talk more about that in a moment. We are trying to finish the review and approval of all the projects. We're just about there. And kudos to Adrian and others in the PWLE community who've really been building that community and network over the last 4 or 5 months or so. So, and ongoing sustainability work that we'll talk about. So lots going on, and maybe I'll just dive into a couple things more specifically. So first of all, a thank you for all of you, all of those who participated in our second annual meeting. I love this meeting. We had it in January. It's a really great it's energizing. It's a great way to bring the community together. It's so great to connect with people and to hear what's going on. It's the value of those hallway conversations and unplanned conversations on top of the program of work we had is incredible. So our thanks for making it such a success. In addition to bringing joy to me, the actual purpose of the meeting is to share updates on the work that's happening in pediatric cancer, and to also have a forum for discussions around our future, the future direction of ACCESS, but the future direction of some of the important issues in pediatric cancer. So we had 218 people participating, some mostly in person, some virtual, and some hybrid, which is significantly more than we had in our first meeting. 13 different presentations, 28 e-posters, a good panel discussion from multiple perspectives on the issues around drug access in Canada for pediatric cancer. We had what is becoming a bit of a traditional event, a hallmark event, which is a carousel session where we consult in a rapid way with as many people as possible. And this focus for this one was on a national strategy for pediatric cancer. We also crammed in some lunch and learn workshops. So thank you to those who took on extra work organizing those. And then we bookended the meeting with remarks from the then new president of CIHR, Dr. Paul Hebert. So action-packed. We've now, as I mentioned, published the report from the meeting. So that's a picture of it there on the right, but you can get it on our website with that URL below. But there are really sort of 3 key themes from the report. The first is that our research themes and projects have already demonstrated significant progress and impact. And within that, ACCESS is committed to next steps that include finalizing the portfolio of projects, working with the co-leads to foster more effective cross-consortium linkages. This is a message we heard, especially when we had a specific engagement with the co-leads of all the different themes and groups. We are now moving or evolving our communication strategy from being what we're doing to what the impact of our work is. And you'll see that hopefully in things like the newsletter. And we also use the meeting to launch a partnership forum that we hope will support and strengthen all of our work in the community. The second theme was about the organization's key role to play in accelerating access to pediatric cancer medicines. Helen has really taken the lead on this from the Secretariat, and our next steps there were a call to action for people interested in this topic and the establishment of a working group to try to decide how do we prioritize work for access in this space. And then the third is, which really came out of that carousel session, was that there was it really enforced and reinforced the need and the opportunity we have as a community to advocate for a national strategy for pediatric cancer. So ACCESS will continue to advocate for a national strategy, and it's certainly in our key messages that we'll be taking to government. But I think what our role is in the development of that strategy will be shaped by future funding. So there's a little bit of an unknown there, but a very solid commitment for us to make sure that this message is heard loud and clear by our policymakers. Okay, some other more quick hit recent activities of note. So I mentioned our first EAB meeting, and then it was focused on improving access to pediatric cancer trials in Canada. And we will continue that discussion when we next meet in September. A number of people participated from ACCESS in the Accelerate meeting, a European meeting in Brussels. And we wanted to particularly congratulate Antonia Palmer. Sorry for the fuzzy picture. It was as close as I could get to her, for becoming a member of the Scientific Steering Committee for Accelerate. So a great honor for Antonia and for Canada. Our second issue of the ACCESS newsletter was published last month. If you missed it, it's on our website. A number of us also attended the American Association for Cancer Research meeting in Chicago. AACR has been increasing their commitment to pediatric cancer and now holding annual meetings specifically focused on pediatric cancer. This was not the focused meeting. This was the big, broad 20,000 people meeting. And nice picture there of Adrian and David in the hallway. Adrian was part of the Scientist Survivor program at AACR, which is quite an honor. And also she and I together gave a presentation and posters at the meeting all about access. We just this last week, I think, and the press release just came out, finalized a partnership with Hope Air to partner on the Step 1 program to bring families and patients to clinical trials. So we're happy to announce that partnership. And just last week, we hosted the ACCESS Pediatric Hematology Oncology Career Education and Scientific Development Trainee Conference. And thanks to those of you who participated in that, and we look forward to future ones. And last but certainly not least, one of our most important partners, C17. We've been working on a number of partnerships with C17, and those agreements now, I think we can talk about publicly because they were executed just this month. You'll see a number of topics there: renewal of risk-based monitoring framework to provide central support for academic and consortia-led clinical trials in Canada. A proposal to increase the capacity to open and sponsor and manage international cooperative trials and IITs in Canada. There's an innovation sandbox proposal that we hope in a future meeting you'll hear more about, and a few more that we're working on. And last but not least, if you are a social media person, we now have jumped onto Blue Sky, and we now have a new ACCESS Blue Sky account, which we would really invite you to join and follow. So lots going on in the world, and lots of discussion about Canada's future and elbows up in our independence. And I think really partially in response to that, we actually have Canadianized our logo. This may or may not become a permanent logo, but we wanted to really lean into the fact that we are a Canadian organization. So you'll see there a little red maple leaf added to our logo. If you'd like a copy of it, please let us know. Also important, and an important discussion at our Senior Leadership Committee has been a public restatement of our commitment to EDI. And as you know, we have a social justice, indigenization, and inclusion group at ACCESS that have done really important work in this area. We also know that this is an area that has been under attack in the US, And we had a discussion in which we really felt it was important to restate how important this is to the work of ACCESS. So you can read that statement there, but we put a public statement on our website and a few other communications materials to underscore the importance of this work to what we're doing and our commitment that we will leave no child or family behind in the fight against childhood cancer. Okay, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie, who's going to give a little bit more detail about our portfolio projects.
Thanks, Christine. So just to introduce myself, I'm Stephanie Grover, and I'm the director at ACCESS. So some update is that we have been working hard to have projects and work that are prioritized come through, starting from the CIHR grant, but to work through all of the themes and work. And all of these projects are mapped to the patient journey, which an example of a patient journey you can see on the screen here. And the different colored circles are the ways different of the themes of research within ACCESS intersect with that patient journey from beginning to end. Over $18 million of the CIHR grant money was allocated to priority projects, initiatives, and work. And we had asked for all of the prioritized proposals from all of the themes to be submitted by October 31st of 2024. And they are being and have been reviewed for fit largely within the ACCESS network, but with the mandate and the vision and mission of ACCESS. So currently there are 45 projects or initiatives that have been approved and various other administrative support and partnership proposals as well. And this, of that $18.8 million means that $15.3 million of that has already been committed to different pieces of work that are ongoing. And we anticipate the entire portfolio of this phase of ACCESS will include over 50 projects and initiatives. So just to remind everyone, or to introduce everyone who are new, of how we work together. So ACCESS is organized into 7 themes of research and 2 cross-cutting groups. And the colors on this slide match with the colors on the previous slide figure that you saw. The different research themes include cancer biology, clinical trials, access to innovative therapies and optimal care, regulation, policy, and economics, education and training, ethical, legal, societal issues and implementation science, psychosocial and survivorship, and the cross-cutting groups that underscore and translate across all of these research themes include knowledge mobilization, and as Christine mentioned before, social justice, indigenization, and inclusion. And more information about all these themes is also located on our website. So since the annual meeting, there have been newly approved projects across multiple of the themes, and the projects are continuing to be reviewed and approved and move forward. These are some of the most recent ones. And so the portfolio today, there are 7 cancer biology research proposals with 3 administrative proposals, 7 clinical trial projects or initiatives with 3 other proposals, 6 access to innovative therapies and optimal care, 4 plus 1 administrative proposal from the regulation, policy, and economics group, 9 from the education and training, and 4 other administrative proposals, 3 from the ethical, legal, societal issues and implementation science group, and then 4 from the knowledge mobilization, and 3 ongoing pieces of work that have been in progress and being continued to be worked on by the social justice, indigenization, and inclusion. And then there are 2 cross-cutting strategic and driver projects that have been approved in the current portfolio. So I'm just going to highlight 2 of the current and upcoming pieces of work. So Christine mentioned that the ACCESS Summer Experience for this year is going to be launching. It is bringing together the next generation of pediatric cancer researchers. And so this year's program will engage over 40 trainees involved in pediatric cancer research across Canada. The program will be held starting at the beginning of June through August, and it will contain virtual sessions that includes presentations introducing access and pediatric oncology and current research initiatives, career development session, networking opportunities for the trainees, peer-to-peer connections, and also in August, an ACCESS trainee symposium where trainees will have the opportunity to present their own work. There is also, out of the psychosocial and survivorship research theme, a small scale funding opportunity for new psychosocial and survivorship projects. This allows for a small scale of funding to go towards trainees or early career investigators projects in order to help them start projects and to develop them into larger projects, hopefully as they develop in the future. The projects are able to be conducted part-time or over several months or full-time over a shorter period. And the proposal platform for that is currently open. The QR code on your screen is there if anyone is interested. And the deadline for the proposal submission in the first round is June 9th. So with that being said, I would like to turn it over to two spotlight presentations. The first one is by Dr. Tayo Tran, who is talking about the ALL 2131. I'm going to not be able to pronounce the second part of that, an international pilot study of chemotherapy and tyrosine kinase inhibitors with BLINA in patients with newly diagnosed Philadelphia chromosome positive or ABL class Philadelphia chromosome like B-cell ALL. So Ty, I'm gonna allow you to start sharing now.
Thank you, Stephanie. You did the hard work for me. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So thank you, everyone, and thanks again for the opportunity to present an update on this trial. My name is Tai Tran. I'm a pediatric oncologist at St. Justine Hospital, and I have the privilege to serve as the study chair for this study. So I'm going to try to repeat one more time this title. So this is an international pilot study of chemotherapy and tyrosine kinase inhibitors with blinatumomab in newly diagnosed patients with Philadelphia chromosome positive, or as I will refer it as PH positive, or ABL class Philadelphia chromosome-like or PH-like B-cell acute lymphoblastic leukemia. So this is just a reminder to this audience that's PH positive and ABL class PH-like or rare subtypes of BAL. So when we actually look at the first table among NCI standard risk patients, this is actually extremely rare, less than 1%. And the prevalence of PH positive and ABL class increased to about 3% among NCI high-risk patients. While PH positive AL patients is defined by the BCR ABL fusion, you can actually see that patients with ABL class PH like AL is characterized as a diverse spectrum of ABL class gene fusions as highlighted in this table just below here. This is also a reminder that for PH positive AL patients, we know that the combination of chemotherapy and tyrosine kinase inhibitors significantly improved the outcomes of these patients since the early 2000s, and also challenged the universal indications of bone marrow transplantation in first remissions for the majority of patients in the TKI era. However, when we look at the results of the 6 completed pediatric PH positive trials to date, testing different combination of TKI or chemotherapy regimens, I apologize, this is a busy table, but you can actually see that the outcomes of these patients have not changed significantly over time, with a 5-year event-free survival that is averaging about 60%. And the primary causes of treatment failure remains a higher rate of relapses, with a cumulative incidence of relapse in the 30%. But also not insignificantly a higher rate of remission death, higher than what we would expect in PH negative patient population. For patients with ABL class PH-like BAL patients, we know that these patients actually have a poor outcomes in the pre-TKI era, despite modern intensive chemotherapy regimens. And recently, the results from the AAL 1131 trial unfortunately did not show survival improvement with the additions of dasatinib post induction for these patients, with the caveat that this trial is actually small, only included about 22 patients, and only 7 patients completed protocol therapy. So really limiting our ability to confirm the efficacy of dasatinib in this patient populations. But I think the message and the overall point that I want to highlight is actually both ABL class PH like ALL as well as PH positive ALL really require further treatment optimization and incorporations of novel therapies in addition from the TKI addition with chemotherapy. So I think everyone knows about blinatumomab, which is really becoming a favorite drug for all oncologists treating leukemias, ALL. So blinatumomab is a CD3, CD19 bispecific T-cell engager that has shown to be to improve survival in Ph-negative ALL patients across the age and disease spectrum as shown here. So in the adults, in both relapse and newly diagnosed setting, as well as in children in both relapse and newly diagnosed setting. So really providing a compelling or becoming a really interesting target or a novel agent that we want to also to investigate in this patient populations of BH positive and ABL class patients. Also, we know from the adults literature of a newly diagnosed adults Ph positive ALL that the outcomes of these patients when using a chemotherapy-free approach, consisting of a combination of steroids with TKI to start, and with the consolidations of up to 5 cycles of blinatumomab plus TKI, really resulted in very favorable outcomes as shown in this schema here. So I think these are provide really compelling rationale to also investigate a less intensive chemotherapy regimen that will incorporate blinatumomab in our patients' populations to address both efficacy but also decreasing toxicities in this patient population. We also know that with recent data, there's actually a differential TKI sensitivity to different ABL class fusion subtypes. For example, patients with PDGFR beta fusions tend to be more sensitive to imatinib compared to dasatinib, and the others ABL class fusions, including BCR-ABL, are more sensitive to dasatinib. So this is the treatment schema that we currently propose for this pilot study on AAL2131. So for Ph positive AL patients, these patients will enter on day 15 of induction. They can start TKI and dasatinib to study TKI for this patient. They will post-induction receive 2 cycles of sequential cycles of blinatumomab dasatinib, and after these 2 cycles, only patients who achieve a negative MRD defined by less than 0.01%, and this will be evaluated by using a next generation sequencing MRD assay that we call clonoSEQ. So only these patients with a negative MRD will be able to continue on protocol therapy, and patients who are positive by NGS MRD at this time point will be removed from protocol therapy. For ABL class PH like B ALL, these patients will enter following completion of inductions at the start of the blinatumomab block. And the selection of TKI will vary depending on the ABL class fusion subtype. So patients with PDGFR beta fusions, imatinib will be the study TKI, whereas for all non-PDGFR ABL class fusions, dasatinib will be the study TKI. And the treatment schema is actually very similar to Ph positive. Only patients who achieve a negative MRD at the end of induction, at the end of the 2 cycles of blinatumomab measured by the NGS MRD assay will be able to continue on protocol therapy. So this is just to very summarize briefly the eligibility criteria of for this clinical trial. So this is for patients greater than 1 year of age and less than 22 years of age. This is a COG for COG sites. And as I mentioned earlier, this is an international study that also include our participations from the ASVAL, the European Multinational ASVAL Consortium, that will also include patients up to the age of 45. This is for newly diagnosed CD19 positive BL patients with evidence of ABL class gene rearrangement, including BCR-ABL, but also ABL1, ABL2, CSF1R, and PDGFR beta patients from the ABL class PH like AL patients. Prior treatment with either imatinib or dasatinib is permitted prior to study entry, and standard adequate organ function is detailed in the protocol. So this is a pilot study because this is actually going to be the first time that we'll be using a less intensive chemotherapy regimen that we will incorporate blinatumomab that will replace some of the toxic blocks of chemotherapy that we used to give in the past. So this is a pilot study to estimate the 3-year event-free survival of newly diagnosed patients with either Ph positive or ABL class, so that we can actually have a baseline, number that we can use for a future comparison in more definitive and randomized trials. We also want to describe the safety and toxicity profile of this new chemoimmunotherapy regimen in combination with the TKI used in this patient population. So there will be 2 separate strata, one for Ph positive and one for ABL class Ph like ALL. Each stratum will have a target accrual of 100 patients. And based on, as I mentioned, this is a rare patient populations, and based on international participations from both COG and the SVAL network, we think that it's going to take about 2 years and a half to complete accrual. So next, I'd like to highlight the support from ACCESS that we receive for this clinical trial. So first, as I mentioned earlier, we are using an NGS MRD assay in order to stratify patients and to allocate treatment according to their response at the end of consolidation. And for that, the clonoSEQ assay, which is the NGS MRD assay, is an FDA-cleared assay that is actually approved and covered in the United States. And which is actually not the case in Canada. So in order to provide our patient populations to have access to the most innovative assay, ACCESS has provided support to cover the cost of clonoSEQ for all Canadian patients who will be enrolling on these trials. In addition, ACCESS also provided support for our team at St. Justine in order to lead a trial embedded correlative study that will be aiming to measure TKI levels and associate with either toxicities, compliance, as well as treatment response. So I think ACCESS is really by providing support to this clinical trial is well aligned with the mission of providing the access to the most sensitive diagnostics assays as well clinical trials for our patient population here. This is just to summarize the current status and timeline of the study. This has been a long process. So we initially got approval from this concept in October 2021, but we first started on this protocol since April 2018. And I will skip all the steps that we actually have gone through, but I just want to highlight that this trial was recently activated in the US last Friday on May 23rd. And hopefully this is a COG-wide trial. So hopefully in Canada, Australia, as well as New Zealand will be opening soon. And as I mentioned earlier, this is an international study. So there will be 17 countries from Europe who also be participating. And we hope that it would take about 6 months. So by the end of November, December, the other countries from Europe will be also be activated for this study. So last but not least, I just want to acknowledge and thank all the study committee from both COG as well as international collaborators from the SVAL network. Also, I'd like to acknowledge all the funding agencies, and last but not least, patients and families. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'll be happy to take questions in the chat.
Thank you so much, Ty. And the next spotlight presentation is Stephanie Reed, who is one of the co-leads of the Knowledge Mobilization Group in ACCESS and a person with lived experience. And she's going to talk to us about Frontiers for Young Minds, a special ACCESS collection dedicated to childhood cancer research.
Hi, everyone. So I'm very excited to talk about this initiative and project that we're working on that's going to help make research more accessible to children, families, and youth. So Frontiers for Young Minds is an award-winning peer-reviewed science engagement journal that's dedicated to children aged 8 to 15. It's open access and it's available in 5 languages: English, French, Chinese, Hebrew, and Arabic. So what we're going to be doing is we're creating a special access collection in Frontiers for Young Minds that will be entirely dedicated to childhood cancer Canadian childhood cancer research. So what we're asking for is 3 ways that people can get involved. And here's the eligibility to participate. So if you're a potential author, you can nominate an article for inclusion. If you have a child, a patient, someone between the ages of 8 to 15 who's been affected by childhood cancer, they can participate as a young reviewer. They can volunteer through links that will be coming up later. And they are going to help the authors by creating feedback to make the articles more clear, interesting, and accessible. Or you can be included as a potential science mentor by volunteering to help the young reviewers understand the scientific process. For this special access collection, articles do not need to stem from Access supported projects, but ideally stem from a Canadian-led project. There are 2 types of articles that are eligible for inclusion: core concept articles, which cover a foundational idea that are still relevant, or new discovery articles, which highlight groundbreaking research or innovative findings, showcasing the latest developments. So to be eligible for the special access collection, articles must be written by at least 1 Access member and include 1 person with lived experience, based on 1 research topic, a core concept or new discovery as discussed prior, and related to childhood cancer, and already have been peer reviewed and published or accepted in an academic journal. We're aiming to include at least one article from each Access theme or group, as highlighted in this slide. So, question: do you have an article that has been published or is currently in press that you would like to propose being rewritten in non-technical child-friendly language for inclusion in this special access collection? If so, you can scan the QR code. It'll take you to the nomination form, and the deadline to nominate an article is June 15th. We've already seen some articles coming in, so keep them coming. For the young reviewers, as mentioned, young reviewers bring fresh, curious perspectives that help ensure scientific content is clear, engaging, and meaningful for the youth audience. Their lived experience, especially in the pediatric cancer community, adds valuable insight, making science more inclusive, empowering, and relevant to those it most directly impacts. So to be eligible, the individual must be a youth between the age of 8 to 15 with parental consent. Priority will be given to pediatric cancer patients, survivors, and their family members, siblings, cousins, friends, or classmates, as well as bereaved family members. And we are aiming to include 2 young reviewers from each Canadian region. The commitment for the young reviewers will be approximately 4 hours per article, which includes reading the article, discussing with their science mentor, and contributing the feedback to be reviewed. I'll be available to answer any questions from prospective young reviewers or their caregivers, and to help offer guidance throughout the application and review process. Each young reviewer will be paired with a science mentor to help guide them through the complex information in the articles and help them understand while offering the feedback to the authors. The young reviewer's first name and selected emoji will be published in the relevant final publication to maintain privacy while celebrating their contribution to this project. And each young reviewer will receive a $75 gift card per article as a token of appreciation for their contribution. So would you like your child or patient or someone you know to serve as a young reviewer? Here is the QR code. It's also been sent out in email, as well as we're going to be publishing it in different forums as well, so it's readily accessible. Okay, so for a science mentor, the success of the ACCESS Special Collection relies on the active involvement of science mentors, not only during the review process itself, but also in the intentional planning and preparation that ensures each child and youth involved has a meaningful and empowering experience. This mentorship model is especially significant as we aim to help all young reviewers be members of the pediatric cancer community. To be eligible to serve as a science mentor, you must have experience in the peer review process and typically have or be close to completing your doctoral degree, although those without a doctoral degree may, with a science background and significant experience in scientific outreach, may also be eligible. The scientific mentor's role will be to help young reviewers understand the scientific process and peer review, help guide young reviewers through and critically evaluate articles and express their feedback and insight, and support young reviewers in developing confidence, voice, and scientific curiosity. The time commitment will be approximately 10 hours per review, which includes reading the article, discussing with the young reviewers, and helping them develop their feedback, as well as submitting the feedback to Frontiers for Young Minds. Each science mentor will be paired with a young reviewer and ACCESS committee of collection editors. Each science mentor will receive ongoing support from the collection editors as well as myself, including a detailed information package before the mentor reviewer engagement begins. And each science mentor will receive a $250 honorarium per peer review. So here's the form to complete if you are interested in becoming a science mentor. Again, the QR codes are available, and there's one last slide that has all of them with my email as well. And you can contact me or any of the other people involved, and we'll be happy to help you.
Adrienne, if you can.
I certainly will. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adrienne Kodire, and I am a Persons with Lived Experience co-chair here at ACCESS. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to be talking to you for a minute about sustainability and future funding at ACCESS, which is a critical priority for our Executive and Senior Leadership Committee. As Christine mentioned earlier in our presentation, you have hopefully signed ACCESS's petition for funding that went from us directly to the federal government. This is a direct request from us to them, and we will be reaching out to you soon to ask for further support activating this request with all parties in Ottawa. Beyond this direct ask, we are using two major strategies to source future funding. Number one, we're working to secure core funding from the federal government, ideally as an ongoing budget line using advocacy to influence government policy. For regulation reasons, it's important that ACCESS remains arm's length from advocacy towards the government. So we've created a coalition of the willing and are working with advocates from childhood cancer organizations across Canada to develop a cascading campaign for broad awareness about pediatric cancer that will lead to a specific ask for funding for ACCESS. This includes a full range of materials with the target of activating families and advocates across Canada to speak to their MPs and influence the fall budget development process. The campaign is in conjunction with ongoing conversations with CIHR and provincial government funding sources. Next slide, please. We are also continuing to develop partner and philanthropy support to secure funding. This is through individual philanthropic donations, third-party fundraising efforts, and industry partners. This is complementary to federal funding and likely to be directed towards specific projects. It is notoriously hard to get donations towards operations. We are also continuing to refine what our best organizational model will be as we graduate out of being a CIHR project into further funding. This includes ideas about being a standalone organization versus being nested within a parent organization. Meetings with partner organizations are ongoing, and we continue to engage with our external advisory board on this topic.
Thank you, Adrienne. And so I'm going to briefly talk about some of the things that are upcoming. The first one I'd like to announce is that ACCESS has a Terry Fox Run team for this year's Terry Fox Run, which will be happening on September 14th, 2025. Please consider joining us at this year's Terry Fox Run. The QR code on the screen and The URL at the bottom allows you to get access to the ACCESS Terry Foxtrand team page. So please consider joining us in September. The next very exciting thing to announce, and it's been sent around via email, is we would like everyone, if possible, to save the date for our next annual meeting, the third ACCESS annual meeting. The meeting will be taking place March 9th through 11th of 2026. We will plan to continue to build community-informed and community-driven work and talk about the future in pediatric cancer research and care and access. So please mark your calendar. We hope that everyone can join us, and we hope it's an amazing meeting like it was this past year, and even better. So with that being said, on behalf of everyone who you've heard from today and the ACCESS Secretariat and leadership, I want to thank everyone for joining us. We will move into Q&A in a minute, but we would really love to see you all at our next town hall, which will be happening in the fall.
So thank you, everyone. I'm going to ask, I think we have Ty, if you don't mind turning your camera on, I think we have you for another 10 minutes or so, if that's right. And there are a few questions that have been in the chat, which I don't think everyone can see, that are related to your talk. I wonder if you would mind reiterating some of those questions and your responses to them. Is that a lot to ask for you to do on the fly, or would you be comfortable doing that?
No problem. Thank you very much for the opportunity. So I can, let me just go over I think Christine Harkin has a question about a comment about decreasing toxicities for pH positive ALL patients because of toxicities, as well as questions about ponatinib. So ponatinib in the frontline setting and also in the relapse setting for pediatrics is not currently approved, but we use that for different indications, and certainly of interest of studying further medications, but for the frontline setting is not available at the moment. Jim has a questions about blinatumomab, how it will be distributed in the trials. Well, as the moment at this time, NCI is still providing the it will be distributed and by NCI for COG sites, so and including ex-US sites. And in Europe, which is international trial, this will be distributed blinatumomab will be distributed by Amgen. And questions from Paul. So dasatinib is commercially, I think it is actually approved for the first line indications based on the AAR 1122 trial. And I think in terms of funding, I have to double check because I think it's very according to the different province, but I do not have a problem in Quebec, but we are a bit special sometimes. So I don't know about the access, but it's for dasatinib, it's actually commercial use on the trial, not a investigational agent.
Jim, I don't know if your question got answered. Do you want to reiterate it?
No, Ty did address it. The plan is that Blina will be supplied by Amgen, which is important because the pending approval of blinatumomab for frontline use in children excludes pH positive patients. I think pH like ALL would be included, but Ty's answered that adequately. So that'll be a study provided drug, which means that all Canadian children should be able to participate, at least from a blinatumomab perspective. And
I also have a question from Jeff, I think, regarding the status of opening AL 2131-2 in Canada. So we are working really hard to submit the status. This is 2131 is a high priority trial, so I think that we hope to open it shortly.
Okay. Thanks, Ty. Okay. So a question, what impacts are Canadian researchers noticing due to recent funding issues being faced by their counterparts south of the border? I can start answering this question. I think there are some researchers on the call if they would like that are panelists if they would like to also jump in. I guess wearing multiple hats. My hat is more of someone who helps fund researchers as opposed to doing the research myself. And there's a huge amount of stress and anxiety, I think, in the US research community. It's such an unpredictable world right now, and I think people don't know each day what impacts there are going to be and what policy changes there are going to be. So I think that's a significant factor for people. In terms of Canadian researchers, obviously we have colleagues in the US and work closely with US colleagues. So it is impacting collaborations to some extent, and there is concern around the funding that comes from the National Institutes of Health in the US, and that it is it's already been partially reduced to Canada through Canadian collaborations being hit. But some Canadian researchers get money directly from the National Institutes of Health in the US. And so far that money has continued, but there's a lot of concern that it won't continue and that grants that are being reviewed in those processes are going to be discontinued. So there's certainly a lot of impacts. We're trying to get ahead of some of those impacts. And as you know, science is a big collaborative effort. And particularly in a disease like pediatric cancer, we need to work internationally in big consortia. So not having certainty and support from the US is, I think, causing instability everywhere. Jim, do you want to address that as well?
Yes, thanks, Christine. I think the elephant in the room is that many of us who are involved in Canadian childhood cancer research are aware, not only, as you said, that NIH funding outside Canada to individual researchers is in the process of being paused, I would call it. And that will have huge impacts, as you alluded to. A significant number of researchers here at Sick Kids, for instance, are receive funding from the National Institutes of Health. And my understanding of how that will work at the moment is when that grant comes up for renewal, it will not be approved. The biggest impact that we're concerned about is an additional proclamation that no US dollars will go outside the US border to support international collaborations. This is having a huge impact. I think the biggest impact that many of us are concerned about is our participation in the Children's Oncology Group. That concern is shared by our colleagues in Australia and New Zealand. There are a lot of discussions going on between the Canadian community and COG. It's a very fluid situation. COG leadership is looking at innovative possibilities to come up with funding from perhaps non-governmental sources to support their external partners, because we provide about 10% of the patients that participate in COG studies, as well as Canadians hold a number of leadership roles in various settings within COG. None of that is certain. I think we're also at the same time in parallel working on a Canadian solution, trying to identify sources of funding that would allow us to, if necessary, pay to play to continue to fund from within Canada our participation in COG. I'm engaged in a discussion with a potential funder at the moment to look at that for a short-term solution. There are other potential funders, including but not limited to the federal government. I think the challenge with the federal government is that those asks are unlikely to be able to be reviewed and approved in a sufficiently timely fashion to address the gap that's going to occur when the COG funds get turned off and CRAs at institutions across Canada are at risk of losing their funding and therefore their jobs. The Canadian childhood cancer clinical trials infrastructure is at risk of collapsing or imploding. So we are working to find solutions, but at the moment, nothing is finalized.
Thanks, Jim. There's one comment in the chat that people may have seen from Archery that's relevant to this too. And Archery mentioned that she and her colleagues are encountering some US-based journals rejecting their work because of and I alluded to this earlier, the sort of striking of concepts like EDI. And so some of these US sort of banned research words are impinging on the ability to get papers published. So Archery also wanted to raise that point. And you may want to look for non-US journals if that's the focus of your work. Okay, any other comments on that? If not, the other question here is thank you for the feedback. The Access webinars are helpful to learn about different topics. When will the next one be and how frequently will they be happening? So we try to have these quarterly. So we anticipate the next one would be September when we're all back to school. So we'll work on that over the summer and then we'll put that together for the fall. If I would take this opportunity though to welcome anyone who has things that they would like us to present about at these town halls, and if there's I just reread this. This is webinars, not town halls. Okay, so I'm going to talk about two things. If you have anything you want to suggest for future town hall topics, they are quarterly, and please let us know. Access webinars are different, and Stephanie, maybe you want to talk about the frequency. I know they were on that timeline.
Yeah, so thank you for the comment. So the Access Presents webinar series, that is one of the initiatives of the Education and Training Research theme at Access. Had a webinar yesterday, as Christine mentioned, and the next webinar is going to be promoted and is set for the end of June. I believe it's going to be June 26th, but stay tuned for more information. The plan is to hopefully have them on a monthly basis, and they're on topics that are related to pediatric cancer research and care across Canada that are somehow connected to some of the research themes. Not necessarily directly specifically about research projects, but about topics to learn more. So I'm glad that they're helpful and people are learning, and we intend to try to have them monthly going forward.
Thank you. Thank you for saving me. Any other questions? I don't see any. So seeing none, we will, you're always welcome to ask us questions, not just through Slido. So please reach out to us through email, through the website. But on behalf of everyone, maybe I can take this opportunity to say thank you for participating and thank you for your contributions to Access. And we look forward to seeing you soon. And happy summer if we ever get one.